All right, good morning. Welcome to our webinar on the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. My name is Terry Fitzgerald. I'm an Information Security Officer at Red Berry Innovations.
My name is Steve West, and I'm an Infrastructure Security Engineer at Red Berry Innovations.
So I'd like to thank the Nebraska Business Development Center for hosting this webinar. And today we're going to be talking about the CMMC Interim Rule. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization. We're called Red Berry Innovations. And Red Berry Innovations provides next generation cybersecurity and artificial intelligence to our government and industry partners. Our solutions encompass cybersecurity, secure engineering, machine learning, training, and compliance. We can help you get secure and stay secure. Red Berry Innovations is ready to assist you in your CMMC journey. We are in the final stages of becoming a CMMC registered provider organization and have multiple registered practitioners in training. Today we are going to talk about what NIST 800-171 and CMMC are, what the interim rule is, and how it applies to CMMC, and steps for moving forward under the new CMMC ecosystem. Let's first discuss some background and give you some insight into what led to the CMMC interim rule. The NIST SP 800-171 was developed for use on contractor and other non-federal information systems and networks to protect controlled unclassified information, known as CUI. The requirements apply to all components of non-federal systems and organizations that process, store, and/or transmit CUI, or that provide protection for such components. In Appendix D of the NIST PDF document, the mapping tables list out security requirements and families. There are 110 security requirements grouped into 14 families of secure requirements. These include access control, awareness and training, audit and accountability, configuration management, identification and authentication, incident response, maintenance, media protection, personnel security, physical security, risk assessment, security assessment, system and communications protection, and system and information integrity. So what is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, known as CMMC? It's a vision for unified cybersecurity standard for DoD acquisitions to reduce exfiltration of controlled unclassified information, CUI, from the Defense Industrial Base, or DIB. In short, it's a compliance program seeking to leverage the best practices and standards for reduction of cyber risks along the entire DoD supply chain. CUI is information that requires safeguarding or dissemination controls pursuant to and consistent with the applicable law, regulations, and government-wide policies, but is not classified information. Information that is CUI will be specified in contract and will be marked. Rules regarding CUI only apply to systems that contain or have the potential to contain CUI. Many of CMMC practices can be found in the DFARS document 252 and NIST 800-171. However, not all of them are there. NIST 800-171 was the true predecessor of CMMC in terms of intent and cybersecurity standards. NIST 800-171 was self-assessed, and many organizations didn't understand many of the requirements. Thus, they weren't actually compliant. NIST 800-171 also had no teeth. There were no consequences to wrongly approving self-assessment, and was very unenforceable. Let's briefly touch on the CMMC model. Each practice is specified using the convention of a two-letter domain, a level, and a practice number. The domain is simply a two-letter abbreviation. For example, AC means access control. Level is the level number of CMMC compliance, and the practice number is the identifier assigned to that practice. This slide shows the 5 different CMMC compliance levels from level 1 to level 5. In order to achieve a specific CMMC level, a DIB company must demonstrate both process institutionalization or maturity and the implementation of practices commensurate with that level. CMMC assessments will be conducted by accredited CMMC third-party assessment organizations known as C3PAOs. Upon completion of a CMMC assessment, a company is awarded a certification by an independent CMMC accreditation body at the appropriate CMMC level, as described in the CMMC model. The certification level is documented in SPRS to enable the verification of an offer certification level in currency. For example, not more than 3 years old prior to the contract award. Additional information on CMMC and a copy of the CMMC model can be found at the website www.acq.osd.mil. Like the NIST 800-171 framework, the CMMC requirements are grouped into 14 domains. Many of these domains may look familiar as NIST has them grouped in a similar fashion. Steve, can you briefly cover what these domains are? For instance, recovery is a new domain that's listed under in NIST, I believe, as business continuity planning. But most of these are the same: excess control, asset management, audit accountability. You'll see mapped directly back to what the NIST controls are. So it's very similar, slightly different, but the families are all there, 14 of them. For those of you who are already NIST 800-171 compliant, you likely have many of the necessary controls in place to protect CUI under CMMC. However, very few organizations have actually met the standard. And while 800-171 is self-attested, CMMC requires a third-party review and enforces controls on organizations that were previously able to determine, you can read that as ignore, their own level of risk. CMMC may also be more practical as it now puts structure around the process, making it clear what level of maturity, documentation, and controls to which organizations must adhere. Here's an example of the CMMC framework convention example. The bullet points below the practice, and I know this slide is hard to read, are the source for the practice. So you'll see in there some NIST standards, some FAR standards that will give you some details about how that practices should be implemented. If something doesn't seem to be very specific, you can check out these resources. However, the practices here are specifically vague, so they can be widely applicable across multiple industries. This is what creates the ambiguity in how the auditors will interpret the requirement and grade your organization. So who is impacted by CMMC? Well, CMMC is going to impact all 350,000 plus contractors under the DoD. This includes primes, subcontractors, and vendors. Some contractors will face some form of CMMC requirements too, but might be at a lower level than the prime depending on the work. All companies, regardless of role, will need to be CMMC level 1 compliant. All new contracts will have at least CMMC level 1 compliance requirements by October 2025. Each component trickles down into multiple contracts. So often we think of contracting as the big ticket items like a fighter jet. But under those, we'll have multiple contracts that go in for everything from the cockpits to the helmet to the engines to the door handles and all other associated components that go into the building these major contracts. In other words, everything rolls downhill. Depending on the type and the sensitivity of information and associated range of threats, prime contractors will look to their subcontractors as part of their own compliance. Having the appropriate system security plan and plans of actions and milestone in place to achieve security and compliance will be much more heavily scrutinized with the new process. The Department of Defense supply chain is far broader than the defense industrial base. We tend to think of the big ticket items like submarines and fighter jets. The basic services needed for operations are also part of the supply chain. This includes food, fuel, utilities, construction, and other necessities. The risks to these parts of the supply chain are just as real and just as dire to overall operational readiness. The DoD supply chain is much broader than the defense industrial base, as we're saying. Literally everything that keeps the DoD running is affected. Some examples we have here: food suppliers, janitorial services, construction and equipment, office and computer equipment, telecommunications, utilities. Those risks can include business email compromise, supply chain disruption, supply chain compromise, and most of all, intelligence collection by our adversaries. So why is this happening? There's been a big increase in cyber espionage and data breaches. Global cost of cybercrime reached $600 billion in 2017. Some useful intelligence can be gained from some seemingly unimportant places. As an example, we'll use something called Joe's Dry Cleaning. Let's say Joe does dry cleaning for the local Air Force base and usually does about 40 to 60 uniforms a week under a contract with DoD. Now, dry cleaning doesn't seem like a business that would need a lot of cybersecurity. However, Joe is now a victim of a spyware attack due to vulnerabilities in his system. Now, Joe has received an order to do 500 uniforms every week. Potentially malicious people now have information regarding the increase in the number of personnel on that base, which gives critical insight into manpower allocations. Therefore, CMMC applies to everyone and why it is being implemented so quickly. Some contractors said they were NIST 800-171 compliant, but they were not. Therefore, CMMC will be enforced by an independent third-party auditor. Now we're going to talk about the CMMC interim rule. DoD is issuing an interim rule to amend the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, DFARS, to implement a DoD assessment methodology and cybersecurity maturity model certification framework in order to assess contractor implementation of cybersecurity requirements and enhance protection of unclassified information within the DoD supply chain. What is the interim rule? Well, the interim rule requires implementation of the following: the National Institute of Standards Technology, NIST, Special Publication 800-171, DoD Assessment Methodology, and the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC framework. The interim rule implements a DoD assessment methodology and CMMC framework to assess contractor implementation of cybersecurity requirements and enhance the protection of unclassified information within the DoD supply chain. So why was the interim rule created? The rule is necessary to address threats to the U.S. economy and national security from ongoing malicious cyber activities, which includes the theft of hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. intellectual property. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that malicious cyber activity cost the U.S. economy between $57 billion and $109 billion in 2016. Over a 10-year period, that burden would equate to an estimated $570 billion to $1.09 trillion in costs. When is the interim rule in effect? Firms must start compliance starting on November 30th, 2020. And this is going to continue through 2025. Starting on October 1st, 2025, the Department of Defense expects all contracts will incorporate CMMC into all new DoD procurements. So who does this impact? First of all, firms that handle controlled unclassified information, or CUI. They must have an assessment on record and the SPRS. We'll talk about this in a little bit. The new interim regulation DFAR 252-204-7019 is a solicitation clause that requires firms that handle controlled unclassified information responding to a solicitation to have a current assessment on record in an online database called the Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS. Based on the information from federal procurement data, from the Federal Procurement Data System, FPDS, the number of unique prime contractors is 212,657, and the number of known unique subcontractors is 8,309. Therefore, the total number of unique prime contractors and subcontractors is 220,966, of which approximately 163,391, or 74%, are estimated to be unique small businesses. CMMC will apply to all DoD solicitations and contracts, including those for the acquisition of commercial items, except those exclusively commercial off-the-shelf items valued at greater than the micro purchase threshold of $10,000 or less, starting on or after October 1st, 2025. Contracting officers will not make award or exercise an option on a contract if the offerer or contractor does not have a current, that means no older than 3 years, certification for the required CMMC level. Furthermore, CMMC certification requirements are required to be flowed down to subcontractors at all tiers based on the sensitivity of the unclassified information flowed down to each subcontractor. Firms are required to comply with the required level at the time of the award. It is important to note the firm is not required to meet the level at the time of proposal or offer submission, as to give them time to meet the required level if needed. However, after a contract award, it's too late to get the affairs in order. If the firm is not at the required level at the time of award, they will lose the contract, as this provides an increased risk to the department with respect to the schedule and uncertainty with respect to the case where the contractor is unable to achieve the required CMMC level in a reasonable amount of time, given their current cybersecurity posture. This potential delay would apply to the entire supply chain and prevent the appropriate flow of CUI and FCI. So how do I know if it affects me? Know whether or not you are in possession of any controlled unclassified information, CUI, or covered defense information, CDI, or controlled technical information, CTI. You may be surprised to find out you have it and are required to control access to it. Check your current contracts and subcontracts and any active solicitations you were bidding for the following DFARS clauses: the DoD assessment requirements, 252-204-7019, 252-204-7120, and 52204-7021 CMMC requirements. Also, check for DFARS 252-204-7012, safeguarding covered defense information and cyber incident reporting. The top 5 NAICS code industries expected to be impacted by this rule are as follows: research and development in the physical, engineering, and life sciences, except biotechnology, engineering services, commercial and institutional building construction, other computer-related services, and facilities support services. These NAICS codes were selected based on a review of NAICS codes associated with awards that included the clause at DFARS 252-204-7012. The Supplier Performance Risk System, or SPRS, is a web portal where suppliers can submit a self-assessment based upon NIST 800-171. A maximum score of 110 is obtained, and 1 to 5 points are deducted for every area of noncompliance depending on the severity. Any areas of noncompliance require a documented plan for remediation of any deficiencies. The assessment uses a standard scoring methodology which reflects the net effect of NIST SP 800-171 security requirements not yet implemented by a contractor, and 3 assessment levels, with a basic, medium, and high, which reflect the depth of the assessment performed and the associated level and confidence in the score resulting from the assessment. Basic assessment is a self-assessment completed by the contractor, while a medium or high assessment are completed by the government. The assessments are completed for each covered contractor information system that is relevant to the offer, contract, task order, or delivery order. Under the DFORS Clause 252-204-7012, Defense Industrial Base Companies self-attest that they will implement the requirements in NIST SP 800-171 upon submission of their offer. A contractor can document implementation of the security requirements in NIST 800-171 by having a system security plan in place to describe how the security requirements are implemented, in addition to associated plans of action to describe how and when any unimplemented security requirements will be met. As a result, the current regulation enables contractors and subcontractors to process, store, or transmit COI without having implemented all of the 110 security requirements and without establishing enforceable timelines for addressing shortfalls and gaps. Building upon the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology, the CMMC framework adds a comprehensive and scalable certification element to verify the implementation of processes and practices associated with the achievement of a cybersecurity maturity level. CMMC is designed to provide increased assurance to the department that a DIB contractor can adequately protect sensitive, unclassified information such as federal contract information, FCI, and controlled and classified information, CUI, at a level commensurate with the risk, accounting for information flow down to its subcontractors in a multi-tier supply chain. A DIB contractor can achieve a specific CMMC level for its entire enterprise network or particular segments or enclaves, depending upon where the information to be protected is processed, stored, or transmitted. CMMC assessments will be conducted by accredited CMMC third-party assessment organizations, C3PAOs, upon completion of a CMMC assessment. A company is awarded a certification by an independent CMMC accreditation body, known as CMMC AB, at the appropriate CMMC level. The certification level is documented in SPRS to enable the verification of an offer certification level and currency. Again, not more than 3 years old prior to the contract award. So some important things to note. We recommend all current and potential DoD contractors prepare to perform a basic self-assessment. Not every entity will be required to implement this SP 800-171. If your organization will not handle FCI or CUI data, the requirement may not be in scope. However, be prepared to demonstrate and document why the NIST requirements are out of scope for your engagement. Plans of actions and milestones need to show progression toward compliance. Milestones show expected dates. If your organization shows an expected June 1st completion date for a milestone, make sure you are on track to complete it by then. Program and contract leadership should be willing to indicate if their upcoming contracts will include CMMC requirements. Regular consultation with them may keep your organization in line with what is expected with CMMC. Depending on the level of maturity already in place for your organization, full compliance at the appropriate level may take months to complete. Organizations should continue to self-assess and prepare for an eventual CMMC audit. So let's talk about what the path to CMMC certification looks like. First, all organizations need to understand the CMMC requirements. Identify the scope within your organization of what is going to fall under the CMMC requirements for future contracts. Identify the desired maturity level. And an optional step for number 4 is to pre-assess and use an RPO or C3PAO. Redberry Innovations would be that RPO that would provide a pre-assessment and help you identify gaps in your compliance. Number 5 is close any of those identified gaps. And then find a C3PAO in the CMMC AB marketplace and conduct an assessment with the C3PAO's assessment team. Allow yourself up to 90 days to resolve any findings. The CMMC AB reviews and submits the assessment, and upon approval, a 3-year certification will be issued. So what does an actual CMMC audit look like? The short answer is we don't know exactly what an audit would look like, as we are still in the initial stages of the CMMC rollout. Audits are expected to be in person and on site. However, the year 2020 and the onset of COVID restrictions have brought up a discussion of possibly doing virtual audits for some organizations. The details on this are still being worked out. The current plan is to roll CMMC into 15 prime contractors in 2021. Those prime contractors will have an untold number of subcontractors underneath those primes. CMMC will be required for all contracts by October 2025. That concludes our presentation for the CMMC interim role. We are here to entertain any questions now.
Daniel, something to note, most businesses will not need to comply with the level 3. It'll mostly be level 1 because they will not handle the CUI data.
Right.
And this approach for from the DoD, and this to make it clear, this is the CMMC AB accreditation body. It's not affiliated with the DoD, and they will be doing the assessments. But the DoD is taking a crawl, walk, run approach to this within, and they're looking to do this within the next 5 years. So this year, only 15 of the larger businesses are being audited. Just to be aware of that. It's not like the businesses need to make these changes tomorrow, which, if they are handling government DoD CUI, they should be following this 800-171 now. So it shouldn't be much of a change except for the extra controls later on. I just kind of want to make that piece of it clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that too. We just want to make sure that everybody knows to be expecting this. And with the way that they're rolling out all the new information, you kind of don't know what they're gonna say next or what they're gonna have us do next. So it's just good to have this in the back of your mind if you are a DoD contractor, that this is coming up. If you've never thought about cybersecurity before in your business, it might be good to start looking at that right now, just to see where you're at, which I think is why there's the self-certification or the self-assessment and interim rule and stuff. So
yeah, that's exactly it. You hit it right on the dot there too, and it's the DoD is also they're considering getting this the next 1 to 5 years, but eventually this will flow down to every other civilian business soon after that. So just to be aware of that, and it's a good time to get started that sooner than later, because there's quite a bit of work to do with all the controls. If you're going up to level 3 or level 5, that would it's just a good time to start now.
absolutely. I have a couple questions coming in here. The first one is, when trying to enter my score in SPRS, the PIEE site will not accept my location code. Isn't that my cage code, and how do I get it to accept my cage code?
That is your cage code that it's asking for. As far as any technical difficulties why it will not accept it, you'll have to get in touch with their help desk people. don't have an answer for that, but it's the cage code that it's asking for.
I think on the top of that, we had quite a bit of problems with their site as well, and Terry had to reach out to them. It took a couple weeks, right, to get that.
It took some effort to get it in there, so that it's a known issue with the SPRS system, but they're more than willing to work with you and help you out on that.
Cool. Next question I have is, can I take the self-assessment more than once?
Yes, you can take it multiple times, and what we recommend is if you score less than a 110 on that self-assessment, you can go ahead and enter in your current score. Let's say it's 101. Once you've made the mitigation steps and have corrected it, complete another self-assessment and then enter in their current score. So if you can get your score up to 110, you can enter that back into the SPRS system. And the system does allow you to enter in multiple assessments.
Okay, perfect. Got another question here. Richard says, it seems like this is creating a barrier to entry for firms that have not worked as a prime for DoD, and there are many firms pushing to help firms with their submission. That cost is difficult to underwrite. How is DoD helping firms that have not worked with them before mitigate this barrier to entry?
I think that's a good question, and it's up in the air right now. That's what they're.
The only thing is we can provide a whole litany of websites, resources out there that the DoD has provided, that the DFAR system has to assist people in completing these CMMC requirements and NIST requirements. You can contact me after the event, and I'll be able to provide a whole list of resources that can help you out. But you're right, it is an issue that it's a complicated endeavor.
And they do realize that the DoD, and they're doing it for small businesses, and they're giving technology that will work for the small business to help them out a little bit. But again, it's constantly evolving, so we're getting new information all the time. As in for recently, there's been a lot of chatter in the Department of Defense because of the last SolarWind hack. So things are changing quickly in the last few weeks with a few different rules. So a lot of things are up in the air right now. It's constantly changing. We can give you information that we get. Happy to send any information from the DoD's CISO that we pay attention to quite a bit as well.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sending over some materials to me, I can disperse those to the attendees.
Yeah,
and then this question here from Quentin is a good follow-up. So are the costs of implementing cybersecurity measures allowable costs to bill in a contract?
Absolutely, it's that way by design. You can we will send out some resources that detail on exactly how that is, but costs to get CMMC accredited appropriate for that contract are allowed to be billable.